Welcome to the Modern Husbands Podcast, where any combination of Dr. Bruce Ross, Kristen Sherrill, and Brian Page host national experts who share winning ideas to manage money in the home as a team. For today's episode, we are going to start thinking rich. Adrian Brambilla, the son of immigrant parents from Mexico, rose to TikTok stardom by redefining real wealth and showcasing his journey of earning $1.7 million in a year while living in a van. Dr. Brad Klontz is a financial psychologist, professor, and researcher who has co-authored 8 books on the psychology of money. He comes from a broken family and grew up poor, but still became a millionaire in his 30s. Today, he's the world's leading expert in the psychology of money. They are today's guests and the co-authors of the book Start Thinking Rich, which is precisely what we will talk about on today's episode. Enjoy the show.
Dr. Brad, Adrian, we're so happy to have you on our podcast today. We're going to drop some truth bombs, I think, on people, right? From your new book, Start Thinking Rich, 21 Harsh Truths to Take You from Broke to Financial Freedom. Now, you do actually have a lot of harsh truths. And our listeners, if you get this book, you should get this book. As you read the titles and go through this, you're going to be like, holy shit, what are they talking about? You're going to be amazed. But I think it's going to be a really strong read for you. But before we get into actually some of those harsh truths, I want to just open with a quick question of like, what motivated you guys to write this book?
Definitely. Well, first of all, thank you for having us. And also, our chapter titles, they say harsh truths. Some of them can sound offensive, but there's a lot of love inside the chapters that go with context. And, don't hold back, either of you. Like, feel free to grill us, ask questions. That we already made the book, so we can't take it back.
Duly noted.
But for sure, the underlying reason why we made this book is to help people make an impact. I mean, I don't know if there's any authors listening, but there's really not a lot of money in the book itself. We're not doing it for the money. It's for the impact. Right. In fact, Brad and I both entrepreneurs. We have businesses that do produce cash flow. This is truly out of a love of impact and helping people. And on paper, Brad and I are completely opposite. He's a doctor and all educated. I'm not. We got connected. I was living in a van and talking about the FIRE movement and wealth and having a super high income and living in a van. That's how I got viral and really popular. So we have completely different backgrounds, but our message is the same around this concept of how to best use money and what does wealth actually mean. It's about time and choice and freedom, and has nothing to do with objects and anything you can buy. It's just more having a choice and desire of with your freedom. How do you spend that time? Some of the more deeper questions that I think right now, if we look at algorithms on what they define as success or financial freedom, it doesn't look like that. It looks like a Lamborghini and a mansion and flying private. Mm-hmm. And these things, as we say in our book, and we aligned in our TikTok, we made over 10,000 videos. That same message, like that's fake. It's superficial. And we're trying to keep it real and trying to wake people up.
Yeah, and so I am a distinguished professor, of course, blah blah blah, and I do work with a bunch of ultra wealthy people, managing assets and all that. This book, though, is the manual that I wish I had when I was a low income teenager, and so there's several things about it. So first of all, we said things in a harsh manner. And we did that on purpose because I found that to be probably the times that I've had the biggest shifts in my life is where someone gave it to me straight. Honestly, somebody loved me so much that they were willing to offend me by giving it to me straight. And I worked in a low-income high school for about 20 years on Kauai. And I would say things in meetings with parents and teachers around the value of education and why it's so important to study. And then I would, which by the way, I do believe, and then when I'd have the oppositional kid in my classroom, I would shut the door, make sure no one else is listening, and then I would just give it to him straight about why he should get good grades and straight up because you're going to make more money. Learning all these things is great, and I would bust out the chart on educational attainment and income, and I'd be like, look, here's the game. The game is this. The further you get along this, the more money you're going to make. And the less you're going to have to sweat. Okay, so this is why I kept going to school. So I got a doctorate because I realized that the more education I got, the less I would have to work. And more importantly, the less I would have to sweat. And so that was my rationale for staying in school. And so for each of these chapters, honestly, we did test them on social media. We had these concepts, and we wanted to see which ones got people's attention. So that's how we worded them. But these are also the harsh truths that I would tell you if I actually loved you.
And I got to add on here. So I skimmed through the book. Obviously, I've got the chapter titles in front of me, and I have not read the book in its entirety. And I'm frustrated I haven't. It's because of lack of time for other commitments. I just got it last week, and I cannot wait to read it in detail. Again, I've skimmed it, and what my takeaway was is like when I reviewed the chapter titles and then the parts I skimmed and a couple chapters I read. This is how I talk to my kids. This is how I talk to my own kids.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, this is how I used to talk to my students. And, that they're, like the chapter title that sticks out to me is complaining is for losers. Now I get it. Like if you're trying to not offend anyone, if you're trying to recognize that there are things that happen to you in your life that maybe might make it difficult to, so-called win. I get that. I understand those things, but it doesn't do anybody any good to believe that complaining is going to ever lead to success. Complaining is for losers is exactly what you tell your children if you want them to be successful. So that's what I love about the book that you wrote, Adrian and Brad, is that these are harsh truths that sometimes you might be taken back a little bit. You might be subtly or slightly offended initially, but this is life. And if you're going to work through life and the challenges that are in front of you, you need to accept harsh truths, and you dive into that in this book. So we are looking forward to talking about this book, learning more, and then making sure at the end folks know where to purchase the book.
Yeah. And I actually just want to add on to that as well, is that if you're dropping some real truths here, it's coming from a place of love, as both of you said. It's not just to make people angry, but if it is striking a nerve, I think that is definitely a place that needs to be explored and have some like introspection about of like, why is this hitting a nerve? Why isn't it working for me? Why am I not getting ahead because of this or that? So let's just jump into it. Let's start off with just only poor people think the system is rigged, right?
Whoa.
Let's explore this harsh truth.
Dang, did we say that?
I think that was your idea, Adrian.
So, Adrian, take us away.
By the way, I just blame anytime there's any controversy around these chapters, I immediately just blame Adrian.
And I did the same. I blame Brad. But,
yeah, it works out great.
I mean, yeah, we're starting off harsh here, but
so the reality is the system, and we talk about what is a system? This country that we live in, getting a 9-to-5 education. We're talking about all the systems. They are actually rigged. This is reality. And by the way, first I want to take a step back. Poor, we're not talking about people that have no money. We're talking about a way of thinking. So poor is a mindset, just like rich is a mindset. And so you can be broke and have a rich mindset. You can also have a lot of money and have a poor mindset. So these things are really about ways of thinking. And so poor people, or essentially a way of thinking, is blaming the system that it's all rigged and that there's no way for you to change your current financial circumstance because everything is out to get you. And in this chapter, this is probably one where I'm going to leave some of the doctor stuff up to Brad, like when he always brings up internal locus of control and stuff like that for him. But essentially, it's where you place your blame, and if you think everything is out to get you, and some places is a reality. It's just a losing scenario to put yourself in. Whereas, like, I think of my dad, who immigrated here when he was 13, and it really wasn't my dad, it was my grandma. My dad's dad was murdered when he was around 5 years old, so my grandma was raising 4 kids and then was commuting from Mexico to Southern California, try to save enough money, eventually brought all the family here. And when I think of someone like that, and I think of people that are born here and are complaining that the system's rigged and everything's out to get you and there's systemic problems and racism, I think of like an immigrant mindset that even though I didn't immigrate here, I have this mindset that like we actually left the bad country where we were getting killed and murdered and there was no food on the table. Those are problems I'm never going to have, but I've learned through my parents. And this country, it's not perfect, but we left the bad place. This was the place we moved so we could actually change our circumstances. There are countries where you can't do that. In the country, I've just, if I wasn't for seeing what happened to my parents, learning about what they did, saving and making these I would call it today a sacrifice. To them, they didn't even call it a sacrifice. For example, not buying clothes for 4 years so they didn't have to spend money on clothes. Not ever eating out for like in their mid-20s. They cooked all their meals. Like these are things like if you mention that to like someone that graduates college today or someone in their young 20s, like, oh my God, I would never like that's not how would I live, right? But to that immigrant mindset, they were willing to do all those things, and truly they set this mindset in me that was, I can work in this country, I can work and change my circumstances through hard work and smart work. And that's a mindset that is empowering versus another one that states the chapter of the book is like, there's people who immigrate here to start with nothing and build stuff. The only difference is the way they think. The poor people that are born here, or people that come here and they think it's all rigged, I'm never going to make it. What advice could you give to that person who thinks like that? You have to first change the way they think.
Yeah, I'll say that, is the system rigged? Well, I think it's a much better mindset is to look at it as it's a game. So like, what game do you want to play? What game are you playing, first of all? And secondly, it's a general understanding that things are absolutely unfair. I mean, we're not even trying to suggest that capitalism is the best system, by the way. Like we are agnostic around that. That's a matter of opinion. If we lived in a different system, we would have written a book on how to succeed in a communist system. I'm sure there's a mindset for how to succeed in that particular system. I don't know what it is because I'm not growing up in one, but I can guarantee you this: I would have spent my entire life trying to figure out how to succeed in that game. And so we're framing it as a game. And the bottom line is, if you are playing we use the example, if you're going to go play football and you show up in your shorts and a pickleball paddle, you're going to get destroyed, and you might feel like the entire system is rigged. And not only that, all the fans are booing you and hissing you, and everyone's just knocking you out, and you're totally confused. And you might say, I'm never, ever going to play that game again. It's all rigged against me. And from the outside, you're looking at it and going, dude, you didn't have the right equipment. You have no idea what the rules are. You haven't been conditioning for this game. It's probably better to look at it like it's a game that you didn't prepare for, not that it was rigged against you, although that's how it would feel.
So how do we move past this thought process of having this, I guess, the poor mentality?
I think the first step is definitely awareness. A lot of people, including myself, I set on this traditional path on what I thought the clearest path to success was. And I think having awareness to just question, am I in the right game? Am I in the right game? So I'll just share my example and my wife's example really quickly. For me, I always thought I wanted to be a marketing director at a marketing agency. And then for a very brief moment, my life changed in college. I got the opportunity to dance professionally for T-Pain, and I learned from YouTube. And so I had this original path, and then all of a sudden I was a living room dancer, now a professional dancer for T-Pain, touring and doing all this stuff I never thought I would have. And then I saw T-Pain launch a song right in front of me, and he showed it beforehand. It was called Reverse Cowgirl, by the way, terrible song, and it's also not a Western. I wouldn't recommend looking it up. And when that song launched, he's like, hey, this is back in the day, iTunes are 99-cent downloads. And he's like, hey, do you guys want to see it before? And we watched it, and then he launched it. And then I watched him, and I watched the analytics of the iTunes. It's at 100, launch, you press the button, 100,000, 500,000, 1 million, 3 million, 5 million. I basically watched him make millions of dollars in a few minutes. And that's kind of where I first had this awareness of wait. I thought success path was go to college and work at a firm and then climb up the corporate ladder. And here's this guy. He's only 5 years older than me. He just made $1 million in a few minutes. And then guess what he did after that? He didn't go back to the office. He got drunk. So I'm like, what's happening here? And this is where I had this awakening of there's actually multiple paths. There's multiple games. And I think, celebrities and artists, people that are really they've done a really great job with lifestyle design, which is something that I don't think is really taught, of like, how do you design your life based off doing something that you love in your game? Like T-Pain, I was in customer service, and I was like, I'm not meant to be in customer service. I don't have a patience, right? But I was in the wrong game. So I think this awareness of like, there's actually multiple games being played, and you might be better served in a different one. But like Brad's analogy is so good, because if I would have wanted to produce T-Pain's results and make $1 million in 10 minutes, doing it at a call center at a marketing agency, I would have never achieved that result, because I'm just in a completely different game where like I don't have followers or audience, and I release a product. So I think awareness is one of the biggest things, is just a starting point of like, what game are you in? Is it the right game for you? And then my wife, she's someone that worked at Deloitte for 8 years, and her game was, I'm going to be a partner. I'm going to be a partner. And she was on that path. She was committed, and she was a hustler, one of those like exceptional people that got straight A's her whole life. And when at her 8th year, she realized the path to actually get to be a partner, even though she was on that path, was like, it's actually not less work. It's actually more work, more responsibility. And the income is there. Deloitte partners, they're making a killing.
Oh yeah,
but the lifestyle design is not. So then that's when she was like, I actually think I'm in the wrong game. And because the game also doesn't have to do with money. It also has, I think lifestyle design is a huge element of like what game you want to play. And so she switched, and now, she's a CFO. We work together of our small company. We have 15 employees, and although it's a walk in the park for her, she's much happier doing this than that grind of just a Big Four accounting firm, which is like, 80-hour work weeks. They always say like, oh, is it busy season? They're like, oh, it's always busy season.
So continuing on with this kind of quote unquote poor mentality, and then you mentioned lifestyle, Adrian. As this play into this concept of poor people buy stuff, rich people own time?
Yeah, so we have a bunch of little mindset tests in this book. And one of the things that we really want to draw people's attention to is this poor mindset that we see all over social media. And I actually, as soon as I say this, I start to get really mad. I get mad because it's one of the reasons I got on social media, is because all these lies being pumped into these impressionable minds of kids who are like me, who are looking around saying, our chapter 1 in our book is being poor sucks. And it truly does, and people don't want to be poor. And especially people who are aware of it and have sort of a modicum of internal locus control, which Adrian alluded to, which is this idea that the outcomes in my life, I have the power to influence them. And so when you have that mindset, it's like, look, I got to do something different. I want to have a different experience. I want to have a different life. And so then what they see on social media are people flexing, luxury brands and labels and all this. They're like, oh, that's the key to success. And people literally will say this, well, maybe if I flex some luxury brands, then I'll get more business opportunities. Then people will look at me as if I have higher esteem. I mean, that's literally part of what's happening. They're being misinformed. And so we're really trying to twist it around and give what we think is the actual truth. Like our definition of rich, it really has to do with financial freedom, not how much stuff you have. I know a lot of people who are broke that have plenty of stuff, and your stuff, Adrian has great examples. He was a minimalist living in a van down by the river. His claim to fame, which he'll talk about, is he made $1.7 million in a year living in a van. And people are like, whoa, that's not how rich people live. And really what we are doing is taking the research. And, as you know, I've done a bunch of research on rich people. How do they think? How do they spend? Mm-hmm. And the bottom line is that one study, for example, we looked at people that had about 11 million in net worth, and we compared them to a group of people that had about 500,000 in net worth, which you're doing great. You're solid upper middle class there. But these people had like 20 times more money. And we asked them, like, how much money are you spending on your house, your car, your watch, your vacation? And we were shocked to see that it was only twice as much. It was only twice as much. You'd think it'd be 20 times as much. Yeah. But they didn't really suffer with the lifestyle inflation. That's more of a middle class thing that kind of keeps you stuck, because you're never really growing that net worth. And so for us, we really want people to think about that when you spend money on stuff, you're actually losing your money. And the goal is to really own your time. And, we talk about it in the book too, but my journey was buying an hour of my time, a day of my time, a week of my time. And that was the game for me real early on, is like, how can I get detached from this idea that I have to work every second for money? And if I get sick, I lose money. I mean, financial freedom was a huge driver for me, but the entire thing was about owning my time. And so that's the rich mindset. How much of my time can I own? The poor mindset is how much crap can I buy?
Everything
No, go ahead, Adrian.
Everything is expensive to poor people because they trade time for it. So they want to get a PS5. It's $500, $600. They make $20 an hour. They're doing math in their head. How much time do I have to work to buy the PS5? So everything's expensive. Groceries, everything, because it's how much time do I have to work to buy these things. And in a rich mindset, they're not trading their time for any object. They're buying investments, and the investment income, or they're creating businesses, or this other income that they're creating offers that pays for everything. So it's actually never expensive, whether it's $1 or $10,000. It's all based off that investment income. That's the huge difference that we're trying to get people to, and trying to get people away from. They're trying to level up to get rid of these shiny objects of like trying to flex and buy designer brands or buying these things to create this image or facade of success, because really wealthy people don't do that. They consider themselves frugal.
And I can't stress enough how important both of your messages are for what we do, right? I mean, we're focused on, at Modern Husbands, essentially busy dual career couples, right? Both partners work. Nearly our entire audience is full of guys who recognize, like, their wife, like Adrian has a big job, right? Dr. Klontz's wife, big job. And you can't have a happy relationship unless you're supporting one another fairly inside the home. But more importantly, what matters is that we're always busy. We're always focused on, like, how can we make the most of our time? Because all of us have careers. All of us have a situation that requires us to be present, like living in that moment. And if you look at life that simply, of like, instead of accumulating stuff, how can you get money back? That mindset shift not only helps you build wealth because you become more of a minimalist, or at least have a little bit of that thinking, but you can also think about things like, hey, instead of taking my pay raise and going and buying a new car, let's buy a housekeeper once a week. So now we have more time with one another. Or let's have somebody that just handles all of our yard work. Let's have somebody that we drop the laundry off to. Let's make sure that we, instead of cooking every single day, we have like food delivery services. And I recognize these things are more expensive, but these things are us deciding we're going to get our time back and use that time we just paid for to live our life with one another. And that mindset shift is so important. And the way that you guys explained it is critical for our listeners.
That's so good. I feel like I remember when I used to think I would never have a cleaner. There's no way. Like, I can't imagine people do like, and like, what kind of person am I? I used to like feel almost, this was like the way I was raised, like, because my parents are so just Mexican. Like, the fact you're going to have someone see your dirty laundry, your dirty clothes, and you're going to, like, it was like an insult. I've had a cleaner now for like, I think 5 years. Best thing I've ever had. Yeah. And now we have a house assistant. Brad and I just went to New York to do some press for the book. And I shared just like a silly example. He was like, tell me about your house assistant. What is this person doing? And I said, her name's Psy.D. She's amazing. And this is such a silly example. I'm almost embarrassed to share it. I haven't shared this out, but I was like, so I just got this new grill. It's a hasty baked charcoal grill, and it just came in the mail. And I pulled up the manual, and I was like, oh my God, this is like 5 hours. I'm never going to be able to put this together. I'm not a very handy person. So then when I left to New York, I was like, hey, Psy.D, could you put this together? And then when I got back from New York, it was all done. So like, the house assistant, she's there to do essentially anything that I would have to do. Because I think in terms of my financial freedom, I didn't work hard, save hard, sacrifice my 20s so that I could do chores. Like, right. I don't, I want to spend my time doing things I love.
Right.
Yeah, I would say that the mindset shift here is getting away from do-it-yourself-itis. That's what I call it. I still suffer from it, which is why Adrian's talking. It's a low income, it's a middle class mindset. My dad grew up on the farm. It's like you couldn't afford to have anything done for you. You did it all yourself. It's ridiculous to not fix your own mower, and do everything yourself. My aunt did the taxes for everyone, in our family. And so Adrian's over there. So Adrian's always He's one of the things I love about him and friends like him is when he's talking and I'm looking at him going, damn, dude, like, how are you thinking about that? Like, my brain isn't thinking like that, because I still suffer from this do-it-yourself-itis stuff.
Yeah.
And I got to say this too. The best marital therapy I ever got was just like, fine, let's do a house cleaner. That has saved me at least 500 hours of couples therapy. And by the way, I've done a lot of couples therapy as a therapist. I'd much rather be the therapist than the client in couples therapy. It's brutal. But it's like, it's so interesting and cool. But the mindset shift is this: you have to be willing to ask for help. You have to be willing to outsource, because you're going to hit a point in your journey where it actually is hurting you financially to not do that. And that's really the mindset shift for people. And I've seen many small business people who they have that do-it-yourself-itis. They can't snap out of it, And so one of the things we talk about in the book is, just so you know, rich people are more willing to ask for help. And it's like, whoa, really? I thought they did it all themselves. No, they don't do it all themselves. They're not trying to be an expert in everything. Like the ultra wealthy, they have financial advisors managing their assets, guys. Yeah. They're not in their basement trading all day long. That's a poor mindset. They're not doing their taxes, because, and that's a hard shift for people. But very often people start to have higher income. They start a business. They're afraid to hire a CPA to do their taxes. They're losing out on thousands of dollars. What would cost you hundreds could be saving you thousands. If you're freeing up time doing yard work for 8 hours on the weekend, which is a grind, and if you put that time instead to building a skill set or launching a side hustle, that's where your financial freedom lies. And so it's not about, you got to outsource everything along the way, but you need to be aware of this mindset, because it is going to start costing you money unless you can snap out of it.
Yeah. But like you said, when you started, a lot of it comes from our upbringing. Like you, my father was also a farmer. He's a do-it-yourselfer. His favorite hat is the front of it just says duct tape engineer. So I grew up in a household where you just did everything yourself. And I don't think that we would have outsourced. We outsource the main things we outsource are once a week we have somebody clean the house and everything outside. Never would have done that if I was married or if I wasn't married. Like if I was single, I would have just do it all myself. But because I'm buying time for now to spend with my spouse, we make that investment. And I look at it as an investment in our marriage, not necessarily just an investment in our time.
Yeah, I can say
and that investing in your marriage will save you 50% of your net worth.
Yeah, well said.
You know what I'm saying? So it's a really important investment.
I grew up with the mentality of never pay for something you can do yourself.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so that's just the do-it-yourself-itis. And I think because of probably with this podcast and stuff, and just through arguments with my fiance of just we broke down, we hired landscapers to do starting over the summer. And it's been great because it's opened up all this time, but also there's not the mental or emotional energy expended. So it's not saving just the 8 hours on Saturday. It's not, I don't have to plan around it. I don't have to be thinking about it. I don't have to be oh, it's Tuesday. Oh, it's going to rain now. When can I get this done? Do I need to leave work early to get it done? It's just eliminated all of this kind of emotional, mental burden as well.
Yep.
I think that's awesome. I was in Japan for pretty much half the year. And one thing I'm trying to change is a way of thinking where when I started outsourcing all these things, immediately I thought, well, now I have all this time to actually be more productive, to maximize, to optimize what things can I do. But sometimes, and I think that what I learned from Japanese culture is they're actually not trying to make if you're in a coffee shop, they're not trying to count in America, how many coffees, what's the most coffees we can make today. They're trying to make the maximum amount. They're more of let's make the best cup of coffee for every person that comes in. So when they have this cup of coffee, wow, this was so amazing. It was made with love. So I think the mental clarity in your aspect of now not doing yard work doesn't mean now what other work could I do? Actually take the time to enjoy your life, enjoy the moment, enjoy the journey. It's just something I feel it's not said enough. It's more of we're always thinking about our financial freedom goal and that end point. And it's really one of our chapter titles is retirement is for dead people. And there's sad data that when people retire, they lose purpose. And what happens? They actually die after. So it's we have to actually and this is really hard for the Japanese culture and other cultures, not Western culture. This is not something that they would need to hear, but for us, we need to hear this. We actually do need to enjoy the process, the journey of where we're at now, even if it's in a position of debt and you're struggling. You still got to enjoy the game and the process of the journey of watching you grow. You have to enjoy the moments. So I think if you don't, and all of a sudden you just sacrifice 100% of your life to finally get to this point, how it's so hard to then make this switch. Like, okay, now I'm here, I'm a millionaire, I'm going to switch and start enjoying my life. It doesn't work like that.
Absolutely. Now, as a college professor, I got to ask this next harsh truth here. So if you want to get rich, go to college, get rich, and buy a house, or not. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so it's if you want to get rich, go to college, get married, buy a house, or not. And really what we were doing here is, the other thing that drives me nuts on social media is when I hear people peddling bullshit. And I actually consider myself fairly open-minded. And by the way, if you wanted to tell me I wasn't, I'd be very open to hearing how I'm not, because I'd like to be more open-minded. And so when I see people say things like, college isn't worth it anymore, you know, my first thought is like, is that right? Oh my gosh. And then I immediately go try to find out if, where's the data on that? And as soon as I see the data that college isn't worth it anymore, we'll have a chapter that says college isn't worth it anymore. We do not care. But the fact is, the average college grad makes about 1.2 million more over their lifetime. Now, however, we also in the book give you the 10 worst majors for making money, and the 10 best. And the bottom line is, if you go to college, if your goal is to go to college to increase your income, if you get certain majors, and by the way, they're the great ones, the fun ones, the ones that do the best for society, unfortunately, you could be making less than minimum wage. You could be setting yourself up for a lifetime of struggle and debt you can't pay back. So college could be the absolute worst decision of your life. We also talk about, I also hear this all the time too, and this is more from the, I don't know what you would call this space in social media, but it's like this angry male, angry single male space, right? And it's all like, marriage isn't worth it anymore, and women make you broke, and all this kind of stuff. And so I immediately go, oh, is this true? And so then I go look, and it's like, well, actually, the average married person between the ages of 25 and 35, somewhere in there, 10 times the net worth of the average single person at that age. 10 times. Now, when you break down the numbers a little bit further, for women, it's 7x. For men, it's 3x. So even for the men who are bitching and complaining, and by the way, like, again, is it true? I don't care. I want to know if it's true. I'm a peddler of truth, mainly because I'm always looking to find what works for myself to adopt it and then teach as many people as I can. 3 times the net worth. And so I'm like, well, guys, actually getting married. And, I grew up, I had a single mom for a while, and like all the love to single moms out there. Yeah. It's brutal. Okay. It was brutal. And we had no money, and my mom we had to have people come live in our house, to help pay the mortgage. And I was in daycare. I mean, by the way, none of that's bad. We all got to do what we got to do. But she had no choice in the matter, and she would have probably made some different choices. We had one bathroom in the house, and we're sharing the house with other people. But so anyway, it's rough. It's rough. And so when I would shut the door with my kids, I'd be like, hey, look, if you want to get rich, you need to stay in school, and please get married before you have kids. And by the way, it sounds controversial, but these are kids. We're not trying to shame anyone who has gone a different path, who had to get out of a marriage that was abusive. Of course you do. Like, financial freedom is not your first priority in that circumstance at all. You put that on the side, and you protect yourself and you protect your family. Of course, we're not trying to shame anyone. We're just trying to give the stats, we're pro-marriage. And by the way, we're also pro-staying married, because that'll destroy your net worth. So get into couples therapy. It's way cheaper. And then the house thing is an interesting thing, because Adrian and I, this is the one area that we sort of had different opinions on initially. Yeah. Yeah. Is it a better investment to buy a house or to rent a house? And I'll actually kick it over to Adrian on this because he actually has convincing data. And by the way, we went back and forth on this one for a long time on the data too. But he's got data in the back that shows actually, if you did everything the way a robot would do it, you're probably better off renting, but we're not robots. But anyway, I'll kick it over to you, Adrian, to talk about that.
Yeah, I feel like this is that open-mindedness. It's easy to say you're open-minded, but then when you get challenged, that's where, how open-minded are you? And so for me, I was on the far side of renting in terms of like growing your net worth, and having the income. Renting is a better choice for longevity to try to have a higher net worth, trying to build wealth faster. And Brad would say, well, the data doesn't show that. So then we did math on like all the top cities in the US, and like what the average rent is, what the average mortgage is. And with, there's some financial influencer contents, they're saying one thing, other people saying the others. And now I feel like I'm more moderate. And it really comes down to the human. We are humans. We're not robots. If you were a mathematical robot, you could find places to rent, and with the differences between like phantom costs and mortgage and interest, you would actually have more money to invest with. And of course, if you invest in the S&P 500 over the long period versus putting that in your mortgage, you would actually make more money as your net worth. But no one does that. We're emotional creatures. And so with someone is renting, they're not taking that extra savings and trying to invest more of it. That's just not what we do. No one does that unless they're like part of an extreme FIRE movement advocate. And instead, what now I'm more moderate, where what Brad has shared with me, it's like, here's the reason why. When you get a mortgage, it's forced savings. It's forced savings. You have to put that money in. Yes, there's interest. Like actually, when I was in Japan this year, we came back and our AC went bust, and that was like a $15,000 bill. So again, I didn't plan for that, but it happened. Irrelevant of all that, it's forced savings every single month to a mortgage, and that's the reason why people and most millionaires have homes, is because of that. If you were a unemotional robot, you could rent and you could have a higher net worth, but that's just not who we are.
But the challenge is that for the everyday person, the greatest asset that they own, the most valuable assets that they own, is their home. And what's really disturbing for me is that the housing market, particularly in the last 20 years, has been really volatile, right? So following the financial collapse, 1 in 4 homes were underwater. Now it's only 1%, but people can't afford to buy a home. And so when you look at it from like that perspective, it's not as clear. I ran the numbers. I was curious about this because I've been on both ends of the spectrum. Like when I was finishing up school in my final year, I was also working almost full time, and I was renting by the room. And I don't know if you've ever rented by the room, but I was the only one in that house who was not out of jail or out of prison and on probation. And there was a shared kitchen. And I remember my friends were like, Jesus, Paige, you really went overboard on this one. But the rent was like $7 a month. I don't know. It was super cheap. But I had money that I was investing in my IRA, and then I bought a duplex eventually, right? Now I realized that it's not normal to want to rent in a 1-bedroom, rent by the room place. And when you have a family, you can't do that. But people, like, when you start to crunch the numbers, it's insane. I looked at in 1983, if you were to buy a house for $70,000, that was a median price, and go through all of the different things that you would have to do. You'd have to pay insurance on that house. You're gonna have to pay property taxes, right? You're gonna have to pay, obviously, the mortgage, which over time, the house is gonna costing twice as much. The net so-called loss of that is about $500,000 if you were to fast forward to today. But if you were to throw that money in the stock market, you'd have a net gain of, again, if you were to throw it just in the index fund in 1983, the index fund, 1.2 million, right? Just because, when it's thrown in the index fund, it's not taxed, right? You as long as you put it in a Roth IRA, you're not paying insurance on it, right? You're not paying utility bills on it. But yet most people think, a house is the greatest investment. And so, Adrian, I'm with you on this one. I think a house is like one of those things where, for the sake of your marriage, if your wife or your partner or your spouse really wants a nice house, some things that you have to concede on. But that doesn't necessarily make it the best investment, right?
As a Modern Husbands podcast listener, you recognize the importance of evidence-based advice from leading national experts for your marriage. That's why we know you will love our marriage toolkit. Nearly 50 national experts came together to provide bite-sized advice to manage the toughest topics couples face in managing money in the home as a team. Go to modernhusbands.com for your free preview of our marriage toolkit to start, strengthen, or rebuild your marriage. Once again, that's modernhusbands.com to sign up for your free preview of our marriage toolkit. Now back to the show.
Yeah,
Finally,
for sure.
I finally found someone. We've done like 40 podcasts. This is the first time. Thank you, Brian.
No problem, man. No problem. You lived in a van for a year. I lived in a place where you rent by the room with a bunch of ex-convicts, but we sure as hell started making our money early.
It's so funny, Brian, because I know you hadn't read this chapter, but we actually have a chapter that's called "Get a Roommate, Get on the Bus, Get Sober, Get Bald, and Get a Side Hustle, or Shut Up About Being Poor."
So my a biography about Brian Page.
Exactly. You could do a little better on the bald thing. You're only partway there. But what we did is we get people who say, and again, this chapter was written with some, I don't want to say a little bit of sarcasm, but honestly, like, we get people saying, I can't afford to invest. I can't afford to invest. And we just called bullshit on it. It's like, for most people, actually, no, you can. You're prioritizing other things, and we actually have a chart in there with using 10% annual return over 25 years and the number of roommates you get and how many millions you would have. The biggest expense people have is, rent. It's $2,000 a month on average in the US. So we just see the average numbers. How much money people spend on alcohol, we looked at the average. How much people spend on their car, we looked at the average. Yeah. And then we looked at if you invested that instead over 25 years. So essentially the numbers are that if you got a roommate in $1.3 million savings for you.
Really? Over how many years?
25 years.
Okay. Brad.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I want to hear this. So $1.3 million for a roommate. But let me point something out. If your roommate, if you're married, then that roommate's an income earner. Not to say that you should only get married for money, but go ahead, Brad. You've got $1.3 million if you get a roommate.
If you got two, it'd be 1.7, and if you got three, it'd be 2 million. So
what about a car?
If you rode the bus, it would be 1.2 million.
Okay.
If you stop drinking, it would be 147,000.
That's it. So drink on.
Yeah, drink on. And if you shaved your head, 200,000.
I do. I cut my own head. I don't know how it looks in the back, but it's a party in the front because it's free. So I'm with. I love the.
So that's $2.8 million more, and that's not even counting. That's not even counting the side hustle. Like if you hear that and you're like, oh, screw that. I agree. Screw that. So why don't you go make more money? I mean, that's the other option.
Yeah.
And that's what Adrian's expertise, or one of his expertise, is in, is the side hustle. And he's taught me side hustles. As an example, my 11-year-old son, using one of Adrian's side hustles, is going to make an extra $5,000 this month.
Tell us
my 11-year-old son.
We want to hear about this, Adrian.
All right. Well, and we'll make this very specific so people could actually listen and do it. So there's a new type of business that has happened from Amazon. The short acronym is called UGC, stands for User Generated Content. Amazon is constantly innovating how we shop. And so they introduced this new thing where they learned that when you go on Amazon and you buy something and the company makes their official video, like let's say about this microphone, this is a Rode microphone. So the Rode company makes a professional looking video that why the Rode microphone is the best microphone you should get. People, they don't really believe it, because why would a company ever say something bad or real about the product? They're going to paint it in the best light. And what they learned that was happening just organically is that people, for no reason other than they just wanted to share, would create in the review section their own personal review of like, hey guys, this is the Rode microphone. I've had it for a few months. And there was just a normal human talking about the Rode microphone. And they learned that people that would watch their unprofessional raw takes on the made by regular people like everyone listening here, they would actually increase the conversion rate of purchasing the microphone. So then Amazon started catching this, and then they're like, wow, this is every person that watches these raw homemade videos, it's now increasing the amount of people that end up deciding to buy it. So they made this official program, and it's called the Amazon Influencer Program. I just want to be clear, you do not have to be an influencer. You just have to be active on your social media to get in. And then this is the work. You take out your phone, you review everything in your house that you have on Amazon, and then you upload it to Amazon on the back end. It kind of looks like YouTube. You tag the product. So I would make this video of maybe 30, 45 seconds talking about it, and then I upload it. And then it actually exists on Amazon. Like I want you to go, next time you're on Amazon, go look at all the product images, and you're going to see a regular human video of some random person. Like, oh, wow, this is actually happening now. And then if you watch at least 30 seconds and buy, you make a 2 to 5% commission of that product. So you don't have to tell the world. I don't have to go to my social media and say, guys, buy this microphone, because that's a different way of making money. This is actually all within Amazon. No one's going to even know you're doing this unless they happen to be on Amazon and buy a product that you happen to make a review, which is a super small chance. But just by reviewing stuff in my house, last year I made $43,000. And I have maybe like 500 products. I'm definitely not a minimalist anymore. That's what I realized from doing this. So I had 500 Amazon products in my house, and that made $43,000 just from those videos that I uploaded. So also I want to say disclaimer, if you do this, doesn't mean that you're going to make $43,000, but I have a lot of stay-at-home moms that are doing this, and they're making anywhere from $500 to $2,000 a month from a range of 300 to 500 products in their house. And it's a very specific side hustle. Now you know it, and now you can try it.
Yeah, I'll tell you this too. When I dropped my kid off this morning at school, there's another mom at the school who does product reviews. You've never heard of her. She's very small, has a very small account. And we exchange Amazon products today. We exchanged 25. So she gave me hers. I gave her mine.
That's smart.
My 11-year-old writes, he writes the scripts for the products. He does a script. He does a shot list for the videos. And I basically do the voiceover, and then he edits them all. So he wanted a job to make money. I thought lemonade stand, I don't know. So I call Adrian. I'm like, well, what is a transferable skill he can learn even if he doesn't make money? But yeah, so a big part of our message here is that you can afford to invest, and maybe it's cutting down on expenses, which kind of sucks. I don't love it. It's not a great experience, but you could definitely do it, or you could just look to increase your income. And so we give a lot of great ideas here. One of my favorite chapters is entirely Adrian's brainchild, and it's people who binge Netflix without a side hustle will be poor forever. And what he did in that, which is so brilliant, is he looked at the top Netflix series. He added up how many hours it would take you to watch it, and then he introduced the reader to a side hustle that they could spend that time learning to increase their income instead. So this book it's all about mindset, but we get really practical too on how you can make more money.
So there's one chapter title where I thought, I'm gonna take this one, because even though Dr. Ross has tenure, I'm afraid I don't want to put him in a position where he has to ask this question. So the chapter title is "It's not your fault if you were born poor, but it's your fault if you die poor." Who wants to start with that one?
Well, I want Adrian to talk about this, but before he does, I got to tell you that I made a video with this about a year ago, and all I said was, it's not your fault if you were born poor, but if you die poor, isn't it just a tiny little bit your fault? That was my video.
Yeah. Okay.
And literally, one of the financial counselor organizations, somebody over there started a cancel campaign on me and started to post about me to thousands of financial counselors. And I heard this from somebody in the group saying, "Oh my God, Dr. Brad, they're trying to cancel you." And it was at that moment I knew that this was the perfect chapter title. So with that, Adrian.
So this is actually something my dad has said. I know you guys don't know my dad. I mentioned a little bit about his upbringing and story. Also, this is not an original quote. Like if you go and Google this, many people have actually said this or have had this line of thought. And the idea is there's recognition that we're not all born at the same spot. Some people are born ahead. Some people are born, like I think my father with poverty. My dad is someone that had to steal food because he was so hungry. So like there's adversities. It's just true. That's why life is not fair. We don't start at the same place. But where we end, this is now you're talking about a journey of life. This is like the platform that you're given or not given. What do you do with it? I one thing that really bothers me in media and in our content as well, when I've been documenting my very first dollar I made in 2012. Actually, it was 45 cents after working for 2 years and making nothing. And so now I've been documenting from that 45 cents to basically this year. And now when people see me, they're so interested on what my privileges are. They want to know, like, have me list every single privilege that I have. And that's what I hate. I don't like how there's so much energy and attention on what your privileges are. What I care more about is, okay, what if you had privileges, what did you do with them? Because there's people who are born rich that lose the money, right? Privilege is like your starting point does not determine your end point. And I think that's actually a very empowering statement if you weren't born rich, which I think is most people. So there's this extreme mindset of accountability of taking ownership of where you're at now, and know, like, if you come from a lineage of poverty, like what my parents did had to come from that and to come to the US, like they gave me a platform, and like I have an immense pressure to not be a shithead. Like I've never smoked anything. I never did any drugs. Like I waited for my first drink of alcohol when my dad said, we were in Dominican Republic and it was like the high school after I graduated. He's like, you want a beer before you go to college? I was like, sure. Like I played it so good because it would have been so disrespectful to my family tree to basically be a moron. And so I had this immense pressure to do well. And I feel like that's me recognizing the privilege I have. I'm not talking about general privilege, just like the family privilege that they this platform they gave me. But also my privilege doesn't guarantee that anything and for my future. It just is my starting point. So your starting point does not determine where you end up, but taking what you have or what you don't have and just dealing with the cards you're dealt. I think that's an extreme immigrant mindset, but any successful person that came up from nothing, that's the same mindset they have. Is like, hey, like this is what I was born with, but it's not what I'm going to end with.
I got to ask this too. What kind of disgusting, horrible psychopath would give a kid or a young person any other message than that?
Right.
I mean, what are you trying to do? So let me get this straight. You're going to take this young person aside and say, hey, look, no matter what you do, failure is your future, and it doesn't matter what you do, I mean, what kind of psychopath would say that? It makes me so mad. This is the most empowering message ever. It's the most empowering message ever. And the irony here too is like, we're trying to reach people so this clicks. And by the way, if this clicks, you will do something about it. What we're not doing is sneaking into the room of a dying, broke 95-year-old and saying, it's your fault. It's your fault. That's not what we're not doing that. Okay. This is an empowering message. And I get really mad when people try to sell anything else other than this. To me, it's disgusting and it's hateful. And so again, we're telling you this because we love you. And if this clicks, you're like, well, first of all, yes, of course it's not your fault if you were born poor. What does luck have to do? Luck has everything to do with your starting point. I mean, it's like you have no control over that. Some religions say you do. I don't believe that. I don't believe you chose to be born in a family full of trauma and abuse and poverty. I don't believe that. I think it was just terrible, terrible luck. But it's entirely up to you where that story ends. And to me, that's an empowering message. It's the opposite of shame. It's the opposite of doing any harm at all.
Well said. And I want people to make sure they know where they can find your book.
Awesome. We have one place. You can get the book anywhere where you can get books available at Start Thinking Rich. But as a thank you for allowing us to be in front of your audience, and hopefully you guys enjoyed what you heard today. If you want more, go to startthinkingrich.com/modernhusbands. And that's going to include a link for the book, but also some extra bonuses that we have just for anyone that came through the podcast for you guys as a special thank you for having us.
Well, thank you for your generosity. Thank you for such an incredible conversation. We greatly enjoyed it. We could talk to you for hours, but I do want to end with one piece of simple and actionable advice from today's conversation that you each have to our listeners, something that they can put into their lives or their marriages right now.
I think if you're someone that is not investing, you need to at least invest $1. And what you'll realize is the process of doing that, there's actually a lot of work. You have to go onto a brokerage account, create an account, connect your bank account, fill out like an investor profile to say your risk tolerances is your goal. So there's a lot of work to actually do the work to invest the dollar versus always push it off. Like I remember the first time I set up a Roth IRA, I invested, and then I didn't learn until a month later that I actually had to select funds to invest in. Like, so I had just money in a cash account, did not know that. So you have to do the muscles, go through and create those muscles of doing it. And then second, if you already are investing, I challenge you to increase your investments by 1%. I don't think you're going to notice.
Brad, what about you?
I love it. So first of all, that was what I was going to say. But I'll say this too, to add this to that experiment. Sit down and take a moment and come up with your top 3 financial goals. And it could be financial freedom. Maybe it's the car you want to buy. Maybe it's a house. I mean, it really doesn't matter what it is, but spend some time visualizing it. And we've done this in experiments, and we saw a 73% increase in people's savings as a percentage of gross income after 1 hour of actually just getting clear about what they want. So get really crystal clear about what you want, picture it, draw a picture of it, cut out pictures of it, whatever. And then the second thing is set up some accounts for those goals. And then the third and perhaps the most important thing is and make it $1 to each goal at first, automate. So set up an automated money movement. So maybe it's for now it's 3 savings accounts. Maybe you're able to set up a Roth. I mean, whatever. But automate that movement from your checking account to that account. And some banks allow you to name it too, right? So go in there and name it like Financial Freedom Fund or like European Vacation 2026, whatever it is. Because what we found is the more emotionally attached you can get to it, the more able you are to be able to override your impulse to spend money right now, because that's how we're wired.
Now, I've never done this, but I want to add something because you two shared a strategy where Brad's kid is using it in his life, and I want to add this because I'm really passionate about it. But if you have a kid who's earning income, set up a custodial IRA, and by doing that, you are now teaching your child how to become an investor. But more importantly, you're opening their eyes to an entirely different world. My youngest is 16 years old with $19,000 in their IRA already. And it's because they are, and it's not, I'm not preaching to them. They just love seeing their wealth grow. It's in index funds. And it's beautiful because most kids don't earn enough to be taxed. And then if it's in a Roth, they're not going to be taxed when it's taken out. And when they apply for college, it doesn't count against any need-based aid. If they have the money in a savings account or a checking account, that counts against them at 4 times the rate of their parents. But if it's in an IRA, it doesn't count against their need-based aid, and they can even use the money for their own college. So there are all kinds of opportunities that arise from that investment. So Brad, Adrian, Bruce, and I are over the moon, man. This was such a great conversation. Start Thinking Rich. You've got to buy the book. Go to, what is the URL again?
It's startthinkingrich.com/modernhusbands.
Love it. Thanks, fellas. A special thanks to our guest and, of course, to all of our listeners. Don't forget to click subscribe wherever you download your podcast, give us a rating, and share the Modern Husbands podcast with others. Doing so goes a long way in growing our reach. And join your fellow Modern Husbands and have links to our podcasts, articles, and other resources to manage money in the home as a team sent to your inbox every 2 weeks by subscribing to our newsletter at modernhusbands.com. Until next time, be well.